I just want to get our bearings as to where we are in the KUZARI. We're on page 268. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, if you've ever read his biography, there's a very short biography of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in this book here, but it's really not comprehensive in any way. There's very little that we know about his life. Probably the largest biography of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was done about 5 years ago by Professor Hillel Halkin in a series of books of biographies of famous Jewish people throughout history. One of them is Yehuda Halevi. I think it was published by either Random House or Shakin, I'm not sure. And it's a small volume, but it's a very, very interesting read if anyone is interested in learning more about the culture and the milieu in which Rabbi Yehuda Halevi grew up. Now, Halkin is a Hebraist, and therefore he takes a greater interest in Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's language and poetry more than he does his philosophy. So his strong point is really the life and the influences of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi on the poetry that he wrote. But there's still some valuable stuff there as far as his philosophy as well, and really about the trajectory of his life. One of the things that we've talked about before in this class is that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is someone who may have been a bit wilder in his younger years and became more serious in his older years. And there's no reason to mask that, because a lot of his poetry produces that image as well. He wrote a lot of love songs in his earlier years, a lot of love poetry about the allure of beautiful women and of wine, and how he loved to drink wine together with his friends in the pubs or the taverns of the time. And instead of trying to suppress that, because these things are published and they're part of the public domain, you can even look up some of the poetry of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi online and see what I'm presenting to you. But instead of that, I think that there's value in trying to discover that some of the philosophy that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi writes later in his years as a senior is really trying to address the fact that he's cognizant of the fact that because of his past, he has certain challenges that he needs to surmount. When you've gone through a past of sowing your wild oats, shall we say, there may be, or a person who's a Baal Tshuva, for example, there may be certain challenges that a person has that he wishes to express in the way that he views life, especially the way that he views his Yiddishkeit and the way that he views his service to Hashem. And I think that part of that emerges in the next page or two. The first thing that we're going to see on page 268 is that the saintly person further refines his thinking faculties. This is on page 268, subparagraph 5. We're talking about the pious individual. How does a pious individual have such total control over the life that he leads, to the point where he's able to function as a general or as a governor who really is in control of all of the different faculties that are within him? And he says he refines his thinking faculties and clears them of any prior damaging thoughts regarding mundane affairs. And of course, you see that he's describing a person who may be more in his immature years, may have filled his thoughts in his mind with frivolous things. I'm not talking about schmutz, I'm not talking about pornography. I'm talking about just frivolous things. A person used to love spending his time watching movies or going to the theater, and now he wishes to focus himself exclusively on Kedusha, on holiness. So this is the type of person that he's describing. He therefore commands his imagination to project only images of the highest spiritual quality that can be found with the help of his memory faculty. So therefore, he may have a lot of images in his mind. But when a person has a lot of images of both nice things and not such nice things, you can construct images in your mind of Har Sinai. You can construct images in your mind of the Jewish people traveling in the desert with the cloud of divine glory upon them. Now, you might have seen a great movie that has mountains and has special effects and all of these other things. So Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's attitude is, don't say that I just wish I could lobotomize myself and get rid of those images. No, take those images and reconstruct them in your imagination to describe or to depict images of holy grandeur. Okay, that's really what he's trying to describe for us. His imagination that invokes images that aid him in attaining the desired divinity, such as the image of Mount Sinai during the giving of the Torah, or the image of Avram and Yitzchak on Mount Moriah at the time of the binding of Yitzchak. Right? We all appreciate drama. We all appreciate reading the emotions that are evoked in a really good novel. So can you take that information and then transpose that upon what must have been taking place at Akedas Yitzchak? Right? So that's, take the drama, take the rising action, the climax, the denouement, and apply that now to a story that will inspire you because of Akedas Yitzchak. And the truth of the matter is that we read about Akedas Yitzchak not only on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but it's really part of the liturgy on a daily basis in the Siddur. If you look at the Karbanos section, it's encouraged, not mandatory, but it's encouraged for a person to read the Parshas HaAkedah every single day. And part of the reason of that is that it invokes divine mercy and helps us to remember what kind of sacrifice sometimes Hashem may call upon us to make. But in order to be able to emotionally engage oneself in the story, one has to be able to imagine that image of Avram and Yitzchak on the mountain, with Yitzchak being bound and placed on the wood. And essentially what he's saying is that the richer your imagination, the better off you are in being able to connect with these biblical stories. So there's nothing wrong with imagination. If anything, a vivid imagination is very helpful in helping someone become spiritually engaged and achieve that divinity that he's talking about. Or Moshe's tabernacle, the Mishkan, or the sacrificial order, or the resting of the divine glory upon the temple, and so forth. Okay, and in paragraph number 6, he then commands his memory faculty to retain this type of image and not forget it. He admonishes his thoughts and their demons not to abuse the truth and raise doubts. He also admonishes his tendencies toward anger and lust not to lead his decision-making faculty astray, nor to arouse him to anger or lust. So there are two faculties that he's in control of. One is an intellectual faculty, and the other one is an emotional faculty. We're speaking here in medieval philosophical terms, where the mind is comprised of different components. There's intellectual components, there's imagination components, there's emotional components. And basically what I speak to my intellectual side, and I say, now don't be cynical. And don't say to yourself, did it really happen the way that the Torah says that it happened? Or especially in a world of cynicism today, this is a very important charge that a person has to give to oneself. And really say, I know that there's so much cynicism in the world. I know that there's so much rejection of the moving stories of Tanakh. I have to argue with myself and give charge to myself not to give in to that cynicism. Yes?
But it's not only cynicism, it's also, you have to understand the sections properly as an adult. You may still read sections in the Torah that you learned in 4th grade, and they don't make any sense to you now. And unless you go relearn something as an adult with the commentaries so that it makes sense to you, I think you're really just doing yourself a disservice to think about things like a Girsa D'Yartusa the way you did when you were in elementary school.
Well, can you give us an example?
Well, you're talking about Akedas Yitzchak. If someone hasn't relearned that as an adult, understanding, they may think God is so cruel, asking Abraham to sacrifice his son. It will just make them angry. That it's a cruel God.
Okay, so now that you read it as an adult.
I still don't understand it.
Okay.
But it helps
Right.
a little. No, there are definitely some sections that I've relearned as an adult in the Torah that opened my eyes to a whole new way of looking at it.
I think your point is very well taken. We talked about this when we talked about the analogy, the example that I've always given is the story about Vashti and the tail. You know, The Girsa de Yankus, as you mentioned, is that Vashti had a tail, and that's why she didn't want to dance before Achashverosh. That's a way for a child to understand the story. When we become more mature and we understand the ways that people manipulate other people, then perhaps we can understand it in a different way. The Akedah will always be difficult to understand, I think. You try to read even Kierkegaard on the Akedah, and it's just, it still escapes you, really, what's going on in that story. I'm not sure whether a person needs to fully grasp it. I think the way Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is looking at it is just appreciate the drama of it, because he's talking about the images, he's talking about the imagination. And so that's why I'm reading into it, that he says, emotionally engage yourself in that story and place yourself in that story of you're the father or you're the son. And you're trying to figure out how to do this properly without totally rejecting God, and trying to appreciate some nuance of it that you can relate to in your own life. Yes? So, anyway, you have to come around, sorry. But I think your point is correct nonetheless. Patricia. Did you want to say something? No, I'm sorry. Or was it Linda? Sorry.
Well, I don't know if it's really like when you're talking with the intellect, I don't really look at it as being cynical. I don't know if it's related to conception. You were mentioning that though, but I look at it more as it's using your intellect. Like, when you look at certain things, should we just accept everything by rote and just say if you're thinking about it or you're questioning it, you're being a cynic? Or are you really using your intellect, which is also, like you're saying in the previous paragraph, right? You're saying you have to separate your intellect. I mean, it's your emotion, but you also have your intellect. You look at things from an intellectual point of view to try to understand it rather than just accepting it by rote.
Right, well, but also sometimes the intellect can, as he says, raise doubts. There are demons that exist in the intellect. There are the good guys in the intellect, and then there's the demonic part of the intellect, which is there to try and make you think that you're too smart for this stuff, that this is too provincial, and this is only for the common folk, but you've risen above it. That's what I mean by cynicism. And that's what I think he's referring to here. Because it's very easy in today's world, especially we view people who are religious as being primitive and unenlightened. It's been that way for quite some time, but it seems to have become much more popular in recent years. It's in the media, it's in the culture. And I think that's what he's probably trying to say, is that don't allow those demons of your intellect to raise doubts. That's what he's referring to here. Yes?
What I find missing in this, and I'm sure he gets around to it somewhere or has already gotten around to it and I just can't remember, is the role of emunah, faith. On the one hand, you've got your intellect, on the other hand, you've got your emotions, and they're sort of going back and forth. But you get to a point sometimes where you just say, I don't understand it. It doesn't matter if I don't understand it because I have emunah that it is what it is. And I just accept this.
Yes, but at the end of the day, emunah must be based on something. Emunah can't be completely untethered to anything. Emunah either has to be based on logic, or it has to be based on examination, or it has to be based on a tradition. At least that's Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's view. A person should have faith because of something, either because I received this as a tradition from my parents and my grandparents going all the way back, or because I've examined it and it's correct. To have emunah based on what? If no, emunah in God needs to be based on something. It's got to be based either because the Torah says it and I believe the Torah to be true, or I believe it to be passed down to us historically, or it's got to be based on my intellectual investigation. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi has always subscribed to the former. He's always said that because you'll always be able to find intellectual arguments going in either direction, the ultimate arbiter of truth has to be tradition and not logic. Remember we said that in the first essay. That was sort of like the foundation of where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi differs from Maimonides. But it's still got to be based on something. Right? Okay, so number 7, after this preparation, his decision-making faculty directs all of his attending limbs to perform with zeal, diligence, and joy. They thus cause him to stand at the proper time without sloth, to bow down when commanded, and to sit at the proper time. His eyes then gaze as a servant gazes at his master. His hands become idle, even when they are not clasping each other. His legs are straightened for standing, and all his other limbs stand at attention in fear and awe, awaiting the bidding of their commander, without worrying about any fatigue or loss that may befall them. And here he's talking about the obedience of his body, of his limbs, in order to do the bidding of his creator. One of the things that I'd like to pick up on, basically he's in total control, just like a soldier, you know, like a Marine. Just imagine a Marine being called to what is it called, roll call? Where they call them up and they're standing at attention. And this is a person who feels at all times that he's on roll call before his creator. He's got total control of all of his limbs. He's got the spit polished shoes. He's got perfectly pressed pants. He's got his uniform is completely in place. And that's the type of obedient servant that the chassid, that this pious person is, because he's in total control of his body, of his situation. One of the things that he writes is that his hands become idle even when they are not clasping each other. You know, people tend to form habits that when they don't have something to do with their hands, they start moving them, or they use the spinners. I should have brought a spinner today to show you that example. The fidget spinners, right? Or they start playing with their phone and doing, you know, something or other with their phone. What he's saying is that when a person is in control and is completely conscious and living in the moment, he doesn't need to find something to do with his hands. He can let his hands lay idle, waiting at attention for the next thing that he feels that Hashem wants him to do. He doesn't have to feel that I got shpilkas. Right? Having shpilkas means that you're not in control. People who have shpilkas are not in control. That's why they need to be doing something constantly. Now, this is an interesting idea. And one of the commentaries, the Kol Yehuda, has an interesting point over here. And I want to be able to explore it a little bit with you. That it seems, according to the Kol Yehuda, that it is preferable for a person not to clasp his hands together during prayer, is what the Kol Yehuda infers from here. I don't know necessarily that you can make that inference from here, because the idea behind hand clasping for this commentary, Rabbi Yehuda Moscato, the Kol Yehuda, is that you clasp your hands together to show basically that they're idle and there's nothing that you can do with them when you're in the midst of prayer. It's almost like you're standing before your master holding your hands together. But the point that Rabbi Yehuda Levi is sort of making is that ultimately the position or the posture that a person is supposed to assume when he's standing before his Creator is completely standing at attention, without doing anything else with his bodily functions. You remember, if you remember from the end of the second essay, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi had talked about shuckling. Do you remember that? And he said, why do people shuckle when they daven? You know what shuckling is. Why do people shuckle when they daven? He said it has to do with the ancient way that people used to study. They had large books because they didn't have printing presses, and so there was no way, even when he's writing this, there's no printing presses, but there's no way for them to produce books so that each student has his own copy, or own scroll. And so they put a large manuscript on the floor, and each student would bend over to read a pasuk, and then would step back, and then the next boy would bend over and read a pasuk, and then step back. And then this went on in the cheder, and then eventually people saw that when you're learning Chumash, you shuckle, you go back and forth. So Rabbi Yehuda Levi's thesis is that this is why people shuckle, but it's really just the act of a parrot. We're just parroting what people do. There is no intrinsic value to it. And here, he's explaining to us why that is. Because if you really felt that you were standing before the divine presence, you wouldn't need to go like this, and you wouldn't need to move back and forth, because you would be standing in awe of your Creator. They say that Rav Moshe Feinstein, is famously recorded in his biography, but people who would daven in his base medrash on the Lower East Side, when he davened Shmona Esrei, he davened like a soldier at attention. He davened completely still, standing perfectly erect, and not moving an inch. And he said he learned this from watching a soldier at his post at attention. Imagine like the beef eaters or in London, right? Is that what they're called? The soldiers. Perfectly still at attention, not moving a muscle.
Or the guards in front of Buckingham Palace.
The guards in front of Buckingham Palace, exactly. So this is part of the debate as far as how a person should present himself during prayer. It becomes clear, the one thing that I think I admire most about Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in his writing is that he is so authentic. He really wants to be as real as possible. And his feeling is that wherever there's what to criticize about what Jews do, you criticize it, and you acknowledge it, and you fess up to it. And if there's something that is real, then he says it. And he ridiculed chuckling in his time. And here he's also saying there's no need to clasp the hands, there's no need to show different forms of piety with one's body. And yet, there's an entirely other side of looking at this, which Rabbi Yehuda Halevi seems to ignore. And that is that some of the poskim actually discuss the virtue of expressing your devotion to God, not by standing still, but by gesticulating in certain ways, just like bowing is a form of obedient service. So too, there are other ways to make certain manipulations with your body during prayer to demonstrate that you are a subservient, humble servant of God. And that's why I gave you the sheet over here. There's a concept that's brought in the pasuk in Tehillim, Kol atzmosai tomarna. All of my limbs say, Hashem, who is like thee? This is based on, the basis of this psak halacha that we're going to see today is from a Gemara in Shabbos Daf Yud, in source number 1. It says, Rava shadi galime upachar yade be'etzba'osav. Upachar yade umatzli. That Rava used to take off his cloak. This was an outer cloak that a dignitary wore. He would take that off before he would pray because he didn't want to look arrogant in the midst of prayer. To me, that's fascinating because today, when people pray, they put on not only their outer jacket, but they want to put on the long kapata and so forth. But anyway, that's for another time. Upochar yade. Rashi says, chovek yadav be'etzba'otav. That he would clasp his hands with his fingers together, either like this or like this. It's not clear, but it looks like probably more like this, if anything. Or it could have been like this. It's not clear from the language. And Rashi says, Ka'adam hamitzta'er me'emat rabo, like a person who is in fear of his master. And he's in anguish because of the fear or awe that he has being in his master's presence. And then he would pray. And he said, Amar ka'avda kamei marei. And I do this because I want to demonstrate like that I am like a servant in front of my master. This is a little bit contrary to what the way Rabbi Yehuda Halevi describes the pious person who keeps his hands at attention and does not feel that need to clasp his hands when he's standing before God. The Rambam brings this Gemara, and he's in the laws of prayer, in source number 2, the Rambam writes, Tikun haguf keitzad. How is a person supposed to rectify his body when he's praying, the Amidah? So first of all, your legs, your feet should be together. We know that. The reason why we do this is because that's a respectful position to take when your feet are together, like a soldier. But also the angels, also we know, keep their feet together when they pray. V'notein einav lamata. Your head should be somewhat bowed so that your eyes are downward. Ki ilu hu mabit la'aretz, as if you're looking towards the ground. V'hiyeh libo panui lamala ki ilu hu omeid bashamayim. Your heart should be faced towards heaven. Now, what does that mean? Your heart should be faced upwards as if you're standing in heaven. What do you think he means by that? Libo is your emotional imagination, your emotions. Emotionally, you're supposed to place yourself in a very lofty place in heaven. Try to imagine yourself transcending this world. Umeniach yadav al libo kefutin hayemanit al hasamalit. You should have your hands withdrawn, right, or bound over your heart, and the right hand is grasping the left hand. Va'omed ke'ebed lifnei rabo, and you stand therefore like a servant before his master. Be'ema be'yira upachad, with fear and with awe. V'lo yaniach yadav al chalatzav, and you're not allowed to place your hands on your loins like this, because that looks like you're being a little bit haughty. Like this is the stance of a businessman or of an important VIP. I sometimes see people go like this, you know, when they're walking around. What does that look like? I'm too important for you, right? I don't know. That's something. What?
I don't get that interpretation.
Oh, okay. No? Okay. Anyway, good time to remember to turn off phones before shir. So the Shulchan Aruch now says, this is codified in Shulchan Aruch, Meniach yado al libo kfutin, right? You place your hands over your heart, and they should be bound together. Hayemanit al asmalit, the right hand goes on your left hand. This is codified in Shulchan Aruch that this is the stance that is preferred when a person is in the midst of prayer. Va'omed ke'eved lifnei rabo, and you stand like a servant in front of his master. Ve'ema b'yira v'fachad, v'lo yaniach yadav al chalatzav mipnei shehu derech yuhara. And don't place your hands by your loins because it looks haughty. Yes?
You're holding a sitter.
That's what I'm going to say.
How can you do this? Was this before, like you said, that we didn't have...
People didn't have sitters in those days.
Or,
No one had sitters
So how
in
did
those
they
days.
do everything that...
They knew the prayers Baal
Baal
Peh. Yeah.
Peh?
Because that's why they were shuckling, because they were learning the davening like this. You know, they were...
So how do we... What's the...
This is not.
We have enough trouble
This is not
trying to
absolutely. This is not
concentrate.
absolutely required. This is recommended. This is the optimal. If a person is holding a sitter, that's certainly not a problem. But it's a good segue into what I like to do in a non-cynical way, but just to point out that there's something a little bit strange about it. And please don't view this as my being mocking of anyone, please. But I notice sometimes that in the women's section, some of the young ladies have their sitter like this. I got to take off my glasses for it, okay? And then it's mamish. They're not using the sitter to daven from because
In front of the Kohanim.
there's no way that they can possibly see the words when they got this sitter over their face like this. This is not just during the Kohanim. This is during davening. And it got started. I'm going to say like Rebbe Yehuda Halevi because I have a right to, because he said it. Somebody saw it, and then another girl saw it, and then everybody saw it, and they said, wow, that's how a holy Rebbetzin davens, so I'm going to daven like this. And it spread like wildfire, and that's how all the girls now daven when they come back from seminary. That wasn't the way my sister davened when she came back from seminary. That's not the way my mother davened when she went to shul. It's a new phenomenon, just like, within the last quarter century, whatever it is, because somebody saw it and they said that's a holy way to daven. There's no tradition for it whatsoever. And if a person really wants to display their devotion, let them close their eyes. But putting a sitter in front of your face, there's no source for it halachically. And if anything, the only right that a person really has to hold the sitter during davening is to use it for prayer. The Shulchan Aruch says you're not supposed to be holding any object in your hands during tefillah, unless you need it as a tool for prayer. So, I mean, I guess maybe you could argue this is my tool for prayer because by smashing my face with this siddur, I feel holier in some way. But it's a new phenomenon. There's no basis for it. This is not the way our bubbies prayed. Yes?
It's the same with duchening. People turn their backs.
Yeah, I made an announcement a couple of years ago. But people don't believe me. People don't believe me. I made an announcement in shul. It is usher to turn your back on the Kohanim. It's brought down in halacha. If you turn your back on the Kohanim, you will not receive the blessing. No one believes me. They think I'm making this up.
And
They
Rabbi Taub said that years ago,
Yeah.
and people still.
People still do it. Why? Because, this is the way we did it. This is the way we did it.
To look, right? You said
Yeah.
you can't, not allowed to look, and so they would turn themselves around.
Because people want to be, it's an extra chumrah not to look. So they turn around to make sure they don't look. But the Gemara says that if you turn around, you turn your back to the Kohanim during duchening, it's a sign that you were rejecting the blessing. So the blessing will not befall you.
Why can't you look?
It's actually a tradition. You really technically could look because it was only forbidden to look in the temple when the divine presence would rest on the Kohanim's fingers. Today we only do it as a minhag to remind us of what happened in the temple.
But if you
Yes,
look down,
yes.
I think you're misunderstanding why the girls do that. It's because they want privacy. They don't want all the other ladies looking at their faces when they're concentrating on davening for something that's very important to them. So they put the siddur like this so that no one sees their face and they can concentrate in private.
I think it's a noble explanation that you're offering, and I accept it. But I would say that it's preferable then to put your hands over your face. You shouldn't be taking a foreign element and picking it up during davening.
A foreign element?
Yeah.
If you're holding the siddur like this, and so then you go like this, because you want privacy. You're already holding it. You're just bringing it close to your face.
Okay.
Paper could be
Okay.
contaminated.
All right. I grant you your argument. I'm not here to say that what they're doing is absolutely wrong. It seems to me, though, that it's not the tradition, and it seems to me that it's something that is completely unnecessary and perhaps even counterproductive. If a young lady wants to show that wants to daven in private, so she can put her hands over her face, or she can just close her eyes. I mean,
No,
otherwise.
not that she wants to be in private. She doesn't want other people seeing her face. Closing her eyes won't help that.
so
The
there's an
true-
assumption there that the other
Listen,
women are.
she doesn't want to see. So hold on a second. I'm sorry. I got to come back to you. She doesn't want people to see the intensity of her prayer because she wants to be modest. Is that what you're saying?
She wants privacy. The only time
She
I've
wants
seen
privacy.
women do that is on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur when they're pouring their hearts out to Hashem, and they might bring the siddur close to their face because they want that private.
No. So I see this among the young ladies all the time. All the time. It's not. I accept the fact that there may be times when you want that privacy because your mom is shedding tears, but that's not the phenomenon today. That's not what's happening today. Yes. Yes.
Are you allowed to use hand motions then as a tool to help understand your tefillah? I know, like, we had rabbis that said, like, for Pious, for Ashrei, like, we would literally have our hands.
Yes, so these gesticulations are things, there's two different traditions for it. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's tradition is keep your hands at your sides, be like a soldier in obedience of Hashem, be in control. The other tradition is potech et yadecha, open your hands. There's a funny video, I think I might have mentioned this a few weeks ago, about different types of davening. And they have the lumberjack who goes like this when he's davening. And then they have the Olympic sports guy who's going like this. Okay, so there's all different kinds of gesticulations that people do, and they made a joke about it. I got to be honest with you. I sometimes see these young men, and their intentions are very noble, because I do believe that they really do want to connect. But to me, it's the antithesis of what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is talking about, and it's actually immodest, I'm sorry to say. It's immodest. Guy stands, makes a point of standing in the front of the shul because he wants to stand in front of a wall. Okay, because there's virtue to stand in front of a wall without having anyone between you and the wall. And then, when he's davening, he's mamish going like this. And this is the whole Shemona Esrei. This is the whole Shemona Esrei. Is he the savior of Klal Yisrael? That he's got such a personal relationship with the Almighty that he's, through his gesticulations, is going to manipulate heaven and earth? That's not modest. I'm sorry to say, it's not modest. And while I appreciate the gesture and I appreciate where it's coming from, but I can't see myself doing that. I would be appalled if one of my children was behaving that way. Even if they came from this, super duper yeshiva, where everyone was trained to have kavanah during davening. That's not kavanah. That's not kavanah.
But none of us went to yeshiva. You must have gone to yeshiva, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine in yeshiva you saw all kinds of different men davening all kinds of different ways.
My Rosh Yeshiva never davened like that. My Rosh Yeshiva never davened like that.
But the other boys, I'm saying?
Says so. They probably saw one holy man who did that, and they said, wow, I want to be like that guy. But it's not the way to go unless you're really at such a madrega. Linda, go ahead.
Sorry. I think there's a couple things. I think actually, personally, when you're really concentrating on something, I would think that you don't move. Like, let's say you're studying really hard or you're really intensely reading a book. You're so focused that you don't move at all. So I actually think the opposite. I don't know.
I agree with you. I find the times when I'm having the most kavanah, I'm moving the least. If you ever see me shuckling during davening, there's a good chance I'm somewhere else mentally.
And the other thing I wanted to
I
mention.
shouldn't have shared that with you.
But what about when you walk into a base medrash and all the men learning Gemara are like this? And they're concentrating.
No, they are. I'm talking about myself now. I'm
No,
talking
but
about
I'm
myself.
saying they're concentrating a lot.
No,
and
no,
they're
but
going
there's
like
a
this.
difference. There's a difference between mental concentration on text and prayer.
I have seen men doing that. We talked about this, I think, in lectures that are totally not religious. There's someone speaking, and I see someone in the corner going like this. Like, to me, that's just habit. Like, why are you doing that? If they're not davening, you're not praying. The second thing that's separate, but I just wanted to bring up a point before. Yehuda Levi, I think, is more, like, this thing in the Shulchan Aruch about your hands and how you have to hold your hands and all this stuff. What do you think the influence is of the Christian behavior of prayer? Because if you watch like movies and stuff, right, like they always go like this. They always go like this and hold their hands together when they pray. So how do you know that it's not really like, I would actually probably want to do the opposite to try to distance myself from the Christian form of how they pray.
Okay. I hear exactly what your point is, and that's why there are many people even to this day who say that even when you're not in the prayer, you should never lock your fingers like this, because that's what Christians do. And really the way they understand it is that you're locking your hands like this, or like this, which seems the way the Shulchan Aruch is describing it. I just want to point out, the Mishnah Berurah says, Hakol keminig hamakom. Everything goes according to the minhag of the place. And the most important thing is that a person shouldn't stand out in the way that they pray. And that's, I guess, part of my criticism, my critique of those who gesticulate wildly during the course of prayer. Hakol keminig hamakom. Okay. I'm sorry for unloading. I don't mean to unload in this shit.
Well, can I ask
Go
you
ahead.
one last question?
Yes.
Is there any meaning when the women see the Torah and they put their finger up like that?
Oh, that's a very interesting question.
Is there
It's not just the women, it's the men do it as well. When they say V'zos HaTorah, they lift up the Torah.
What is that?
They lift up their pinky, and they place it up like that.
I see women
This is,
doing it, but I don't
okay,
understand.
Elki, it's a new thing if you're Ashkenazi.
Right.
If you're Sephardic, it's not a new thing, because it's brought down in a couple of Sephardic poskim Sfarim, but no one knows today why they're doing it. I saw my friend do it, so then I could do it.
I don't do it
And
because I
then
don't
some
know
people
why.
kiss their finger.
I don't understand. the
Right,
whole thing.
so
Why do it?
it's complete, it's purely a Sephardic custom, and it seeped over, it's one of those things that seeped over to the Ashkenazim because they felt, again, it's like Rabbi Yehuda Levi says, people with idle hands feel they got to do something in order to be able to show their devotion. That's precisely the opposite of what Rabbi Yehuda Levi stands for. Let's keep it real, guys. Your body should be at attention, ready to serve Hashem, not constantly finding things to spin or fidget with. But again, that's what we do when we don't have something that we can really feel internally, so we try to do external things to ameliorate sometimes the lack that we may feel on the inside. What you're supposed to be doing when you lift up that pinky, or really finger, but some people use the pinky, is to trace 3 lines of text in the Sefer Torah. That's exactly what's brought down in the poskim. You're supposed to be able to say 1, 2, 3, and then pull back your finger. Don't kiss it. Don't just stick your finger up there while, hey, did you hear about the new stock? But unfortunately, these are all things that happen when people see other people doing things and they think that there's religious significance to it.
What do you mean trace? What do you mean trace?
How could you possibly do that from so far away?
You can't, and therefore there's very little point to it.
Everybody, I see all the women doing it, but I don't understand it, so I don't do it.
Okay, all right. Ad Kan. We should call this shir the cynical shir for the day. Okay, and even though I said we're not supposed to be cynical.